When I recently took the words of Emmanuel Macron on Africa, every conscious African should understand very quickly what he was able to tell us and what it means. General Tianet said not long ago that the change of tactics or strategies of the French forces in Africa, I think he came to confirm it, is about dissolving and keeping a solid foundation. Emmanuel Macron said it so well that we can only thank him for this sincerity, even if some wanted to put the powder in the eyes of their population. But reality ends up catching up too. They will not leave some countries. They have just dissolved the system.
Captain Ibrahim Traoré has just pulled off something that has French officials scrambling behind closed doors. He is not just kicking France out of his country. France called it cooperation. Traoré called it theft. And now he has banned them from Africa's resources, leaving Macron scrambling for answers. What we are witnessing is a deliberate, focused, and symbolic masterclass in reclaiming African independence from colonial shadows. Before we continue, hit that like button to help us beat the YouTube algorithm. In December 2024, something extraordinary occurred in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. Traore stood before cameras holding up gleaming gold bars, not just any gold bars, but the first ones ever refined on Burkinabé soil. That moment was not just symbolic, it exposed a painful truth that had been hidden in plain sight for decades. Burkina Faso is the world's 13th largest gold producer, pulling about 100 tons of gold worth $6 billion, 0 cents out of the ground every year. But until December 2024, every single ounce of that gold was shipped out raw to be refined elsewhere, especially in Europe, where French and other Western companies would add the value and keep the profits. What Traore said next was not just a statement. It was a statement that echoed through France's corporate towers. This is a significant step toward economic independence. Traore was not just talking. He backed it with actions that sent a clear message across the continent. This refinery, built with help from a Malian company called Marea Gold, can process 150 tons of gold annually. It is more than Burkina Faso's entire current production. Traore was using this to tell France that not only is Burkina Faso going to keep their gold, they are also preparing to help their neighbors keep theirs too. Africa is not just a continent, it is a powerhouse of natural wealth. The Democratic Republic of Congo holds 70% of the world's cobalt, critical for electric car batteries. Ghana and Mali rank among the top global gold producers. Nigeria's oil reserves rival those of Middle Eastern giants. Nigerians' uranium powers 1 in 3 French households through nuclear energy. Yet despite this abundance, Africa's people often see little of the profits. France has been a major player in this resource game. Through its companies giants like Total Energies and Orano, France has secured lucrative deals across its former colonies. In Niger, French firms have mined uranium for decades at prices locals call peanuts. In Gabon, French oil contracts have long favored Paris over Libreville. Even in non-French-speaking nations like Ghana, French businesses have snapped up stakes in gold mines. The system, often dubbed Francafrique, keeps African resources flowing to France while local economies keep still at a point. The French had grown so comfortable with their arrangements that they probably never imagined a scenario where African countries would simply refuse to play the game anymore. They built their entire African strategy around one assumption, that these countries would always need Europe more than Europe needed them. However, Traore did not just challenge that belief, he shattered it beyond repair. What happened next was like a masterclass in economic warfare. Between August 2024 and June 2025, Traore's government systematically nationalized 5 major gold mines. We are talking about the Bangao and Wagnion mines, plus exploration licenses held by companies like Lilium Mining Services, Griffin Minerals, and Resources Furke. Traore did not just seize these assets like some strongman dictator. He created a state-owned entity called SOPAMIB, Société de Participation Minière du Burkina, and negotiated deals. The Bungu and Wagnion mines alone were acquired for $80 million, 0 cents assets that were previously controlled by London-listed Endeavour Mining. These mines produce millions of dollars worth of gold every month. An $80 million 0 cents one-time payment to gain permanent control of assets worth hundreds of millions annually? That is not just smart business, that is economic genius. And the results speak for themselves. Government figures show that state-controlled mining initiatives collected over 8 tons of gold in 2024 and more than 11 tons just in the first quarter of 2025. It is simple. Gold is staying in Burkina Faso, being refined in Burkina Faso, with profits going to Burkina Faso. Meanwhile, French companies that had spent decades extracting wealth from these same resources were left holding contracts that are suddenly worthless pieces of paper. Most international media coverage focused on Traore kicking out French troops, and yes, that happened. In January 2023, he terminated the 2018 defense agreement with France and gave French forces exactly 1 month to pack up and leave. However, the Shorty's rebellion was not just about boots on the ground. It was about breaking the entire system that allowed France to profit while Burkina Faso bled. The military withdrawal was just the visible piece of a much larger puzzle. What is happening beneath the surface is a complete dismantling of France's economic infrastructure in Burkina Faso. French media outlets have been banned, French military operations are forbidden, French companies are finding their contracts under review or terminated entirely. It was not just about removing French soldiers, it was about removing French influence from every sector of Burkina Faso's economy. But the bigger problem for Macron is that although Traore may have lit the match, the fire is now spreading across the region. Traore's rebellion started at home, but quickly became a beacon for the continent. Mali followed suit, seizing control of mines operated by foreign firms. Niger hiked taxes on uranium exports, squeezing French profits. Even Senegal, long a French ally, began auditing foreign mining contracts. Traore's actions were not just local, they were a blueprint for a continent-wide push to reclaim its wealth. Traore draws inspiration from Africa's past rebels like Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah and Burkina Faso's own Thomas Sankara, who dreamed of a self-reliant continent. But he is not chasing the past, he is building something new. His strategy is practical: nationalize key industries, renegotiate unfair contracts, and build local expertise. In Burkina Faso, he has launched a state-owned mining company and a gold refinery to keep profits at home. He has also pushed for regional alliances, teaming up with Mali and Niger to form a united front against foreign dominance. Suddenly, France is not dealing with individual countries that can be pressured or influenced one at a time. They are facing a coordinated alliance that represents a fundamental shift in the balance of power in West Africa and Africa as a whole. Burkina Faso alone produces about 100 tons of gold annually, that is roughly $6 billion, 0 cents worth at current prices. But gold is just the beginning. The broader Sahel region that France is losing influence over contains some of the world's most significant mineral deposits: gold, uranium, diamonds, oil, and rare earth elements that are crucial for modern technology. Niger, for instance, supplies about 20% of France's uranium needs for its nuclear power plant. When you add up the resources controlled by the Alliance of Sahel states, you are looking at hundreds of billions of dollars in mineral wealth that was previously flowing toward European markets through colonial-era trade arrangements. Traore's government reports show the dramatic difference this makes. In 2024, state-controlled mining operations collected over 8 tons of gold. In just the first quarter of 2025, they collected more than 11 tons. It is not just growth, it is an explosive expansion of state control over national resources. Compare that to the decades when virtually all of this wealth was extracted by foreign companies, processed elsewhere, and sold back to African markets at marked-up prices. The economic transformation is unbelievable. But Traore is not alone. Leaders like Senegal's Bassirou Diomaye Faye and Kenya's William Ruto are echoing his call, pushing for fairer trade deals and local processing of resources. The African Union has even floated a resource sovereignty charter, inspired by Traore's stand, to ensure African nations get a bigger slice of their own pie. In 2024, Ghana passed laws requiring foreign miners to process gold locally, creating jobs and keeping profits in-country. The Democratic Republic of Congo is cracking down on cobalt smuggling, demanding Chinese and Western firms to pay fairer shares. Nigeria's new oil regulations prioritize local companies over foreign giants like Total Energies. What is unfolding here cannot be measured in dollars or contracts. For too long, Africa's resources have been a story of exploitation. Diamonds funding wars, oil enriching foreign CEOs, uranium powering European cities, while African villages lack electricity. Traoré's push is inspiring a mindset shift that Africa can be a global player, not a pawn. Emmanuel Macron came to power promising a fresh start for France's relationship with Africa. He called for partnerships of equals and vowed to dismantle Françafrique, but his actions told a different story. French troops in the Sahel meant to fight terrorism were seen by many as enforcers of French economic interests. When Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso expelled those troops between 2022 and 2024, Macron called it a temporary setback. Locals saw it as liberation. Then there's the CFA franc, a currency tying 14 African nations to France's economy. Half their reserves sit in the French treasury, and the euro peg limits their financial freedom. Macron's promised reforms have stalled, fueling accusations that he is preserving a system that benefits Paris. But now, countries are no longer just questioning their currencies, they are challenging France's grip on their natural wealth, contracts, and economic decisions. What started as a currency debate is now turning into a full-blown resource rebellion. France's resource losses are piling up. Niger's uranium price hikes have hit French energy companies hard. Gabon's new government is reviewing French oil contracts. Even in stable allies like Côte d'Ivoire, protests against French businesses are growing. Macron's response, doubling down with talk of Europeanizing France's African policy, feels like a dodge. He is losing ground, and Traoré's resilience is a constant reminder of that. However, as France's influence wanes, Russia's influence is growing. Although it looks like replacing one foreign power with another, it is actually about leveraging competition between global powers to maximize national benefit. Russian companies and advisors are now present in sectors where French companies once dominated. Some critics argue that Africa is simply trading French colonialism for Russian imperialism, but the key difference is in the terms of engagement. When French companies operated in Africa, the majority of the profits flowed back to France. The local population saw minimal benefit from their own natural resources. With Russian partnerships, Africa, especially Burkina Faso, is maintaining much more control over its resources while gaining access to technology and expertise. The gold refinery is a perfect example. Instead of shipping raw gold to France for processing, Burkina Faso now refines its own gold with technical assistance from partners who do not demand the same level of economic subordination that characterized the French relationship. Burkina Faso is not chasing alliances, it is building outcomes that matter locally. The formation of the Alliance of Sahel States represents something unexpected in post-colonial Africa. Genuine regional integration based on shared rejection of foreign economic domination. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso collectively control vast mineral resources, strategic geographic locations, and growing populations that represent significant market potential. By coordinating their policies, they are creating leverage that none of them could achieve individually. When one country stands up to a former colonial power, it can be isolated, sanctioned, or destabilized. When three countries stand together and coordinate their resistance, the dynamics change completely. The Alliance of Sahel States represents enough combined strength to resist external pressure while building alternative partnerships. This is what has French policymakers truly worried. They are not just losing Burkina Faso, they are losing an entire region that was central to France's global economic strategy. However, the real nightmare scenario for France is that once Traoré's model proves successful and spreads to other African countries, if Burkina Faso demonstrates that it is possible to break free from colonial economic arrangements while maintaining stability and achieving development, other African countries that are still under Western influence will inevitably follow. There are already signs this is happening. Countries across Africa are watching closely to see whether the Alliance of Sahel States can maintain their independence while building prosperity. If they succeed, the entire post-colonial economic order in Africa could collapse within a generation. This explains why there is so much international pressure on Traoré's government. It is beyond Burkina Faso's gold mines. If African countries start to control their own resources and chart their own development paths, there may be trouble for France and the West. What unsettles foreign powers even more than his reforms is the confidence with which Traoré delivers them. He is not just resisting France, he is doing it boldly, in a tone that breaks every rule of polite post-colonial diplomacy. His words hit just as hard as his policies. He does not engage in the fancy diplomatic language that most African leaders use when dealing with former colonial powers. His statements are direct, clear, and unapologetic. When he announced the gold refinery, he did not talk about partnership or mutual benefit, he talked about economic independence. When he expelled French forces, he did not cover it in diplomatic details, he simply terminated the agreement and gave them a month to leave. Many critics point out that security in Burkina Faso has actually deteriorated under Traoré's leadership. Fatalities from militant Islamist violence nearly doubled from 3,621 in 2022 to 6,389 in 2024. Over 1,000 people lost their lives to these groups in 2024 alone. This is far from a straightforward problem. French military presence was supposedly justified by counterterrorism operations. By expelling French forces, did Traoré make his country less secure? But the truth is that why did terrorist activity increase during the period of maximum French military involvement? French forces had been in the Sahel for over a decade, with sophisticated equipment and significant resources. If their presence was solving the terrorism problem, why did it get worse? Traoré's argument is that foreign military interventions actually destabilize the region by creating power vacuums and resentment among local populations. His strategy focuses on building local security capabilities while addressing the economic roots of extremism through job creation and development. As much as his actions were criticized, what is clear is that the previous approach, relying on French military intervention while allowing French companies to extract local wealth, was not working either. Traoré's economic model differs from previous African leaders who challenged foreign powers because he is building practical alternatives while saying no to exploitation. The gold refinery is just one example. By processing gold locally, Burkina Faso captures the value-added portion of the supply chain that was previously captured by European companies. This creates local jobs, builds technical expertise, and generates additional revenue that can be reinvested in national development. Instead of allowing foreign companies to extract resources while providing minimal benefits to local communities, the state now controls these operations and can direct profits toward national priorities. We are not talking socialism or capitalism in theory, this is economic nationalism. The goal is ensuring that national resources primarily benefit the nation's people rather than foreign shareholders. Now, there is a sense among many Burkinabé that their country is finally working for them rather than for foreign interest. When people believe their government is genuinely working for their benefit rather than as an intermediary for foreign powers, it creates the foundation for the kind of social cohesion and national commitment that drives successful development. French officials have been remarkably restrained in their public criticism of Traoré, which shows what they think about him. Usually, when African leaders challenge French interests, there is immediate diplomatic pressure, economic threats, and media campaigns highlighting their failures. The silent response suggests that France recognizes it has limited leverage over a leader who has already decided to break from French influence entirely. Traditional pressure tactics don't work when the target has already accepted that the relationship is over. Behind the scenes, however, there are clear signs of panic. French companies are scrambling to salvage what they can from their Burkina Faso operations. French policymakers are working frantically to prevent the model from spreading to other countries where France still has significant interests. The broader French strategy in Africa, maintaining economic influence through a combination of military presence, economic arrangements, and diplomatic pressure, is under fundamental threat. If it fails in the Sahel, it could fail everywhere. What is happening in Burkina Faso under Ibrahim Traoré represents the most comprehensive challenge to post-colonial economic arrangements that Africa has seen since independence. Unlike previous efforts that focused primarily on political symbolism, Traoré is building practical alternatives to foreign dependency. It has already inspired fellow African countries to follow similar paths and conclude that genuine independence remains possible. African countries are now awake, and the West, especially France, are losing their access to Africa's resources. Ibrahim Traoré's stand against France is more than a headline. It is a call to action. By demanding control of Africa's resources, he is challenging a centuries-old system and inspiring a continent to dream bigger. Emmanuel Macron's nightmare is not just that Ibrahim Traoré is succeeding in Burkina Faso. His nightmare is that success in Burkina Faso proves that the entire system of African dependency on former colonial powers is far more fragile than anyone imagined. What do you think? Can Africa take control of its resources, or are the risks too high? Drop your thoughts below and let's talk about the future of a continent on the rise. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you want to stay updated on these developing stories that major media outlets mostly miss or underreport. The revolution is real, and it is just beginning.